following the kidnap, rape and murder of Sarah Everard back in March 2021, there has been a new report that has been released today, 2nd of November 2022, that looks into sexual misconduct in the force. Things such as booty patrols, where officers are taking advantage and stopping women, basically not behaving in the way that they should be. And although we know that this is a minority, the report is really disturbing. So in this week's episode, we meet with Sarah-Jayne Bray of Thames Valley Police. Sarah-Jayne is doing some amazing work on changing cultures, about having conversations about sexual harassment, what is sexual misconduct. So it was really, really interesting to get her thoughts on the report and to find out about this incredible work. She also talked about how she wants to encourage more women into the force. So stay tuned. So I am delighted to welcome a very special guest to the Jobs for Women podcast this morning. Sarah-Jayne Bray has been part of the policing family for over 20 years, joining South Wales Police as a typist and enjoying a varied career that has taken her through many roles locally and nationally. A passionate supporter of diversity and inclusion, Sarah-Jayne was chair of the SWP Gender Equality Network from 2019 to 2022, chairing the All Wales Gender Equality Network chair meeting throughout 2021. She's a member of both the BAWP and IAWP, supporting the latter with their communication and engagement strategy. She introduced the first IAWP International Buddy Scheme, which took place during COVID and saw 40 women from all over the world connect to discuss shared issues. She has program managed a number of national portfolios, including the transition from ACPO to NPCC, as well as the Inquisitive Crime portfolio and the Sexual Misconduct portfolio. She is currently seconded to Thames Valley Police to programme and manage the NPCC recruitment, retention and wellbeing of investigator portfolio, and to support the force with their VAWG delivery framework. As an experienced internal engagement manager, Sarah-Jayne is responsible for the internal VAWG engagement strategy, encouraging a healthy team culture within TVP whilst raising awareness of sexual misconduct in the workplace. Wow, what an intro.
I'm so sorry about all the acronyms as well. I really should have explained those. I do apologise.
No, it's all right. I mean, what an introduction. Thank you so much and welcome to the podcast.
Glad to be here.
I suppose we can dive into the acronyms a little bit, but your experience is just so incredible. And when we initially chatted, that's why I was just like wanting to connect with you. And I'm so happy you've agreed to come on the podcast and share your experiences, because the work you are doing is really, really outstanding. It's such a breath of fresh air to see that, you know, all of the issues are being addressed. So we've talked about some questions at a rough format for this chat today. But in light of the report that's just come out, I thought we could just dive in to the report that was issued. I know it's been all over the press a little bit today, and it's from His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire Rescue Services. And the report was ordered after the kidnap, rape and murder of Sarah Everard. I know obviously it's just been released, but I just wondered if you could share any thoughts, opinions on the report.
Of course. So when we were saying about VAWG, that's the Violence Against Women and Girls portfolio that all policing are paying enormous amount of attention to, not just because of the tragic murder of Sarah Everard and some of the awful things that came out after that as well, but also in terms of our response to domestic abuse and sexual offences, which we know is probably not where it really needs to be in terms of our outcomes. So I also work, as you mentioned, as part of the Sexual Misconduct portfolio, which is a national portfolio bringing together colleagues from across the UK, looking at what are the key issues around inappropriate sexual behaviour in the workplace. So we're talking things like sexual harassment in the workplace, we're talking abusive position for sexual purposes, inappropriate use of social media and some of those kind of issues. They are, as you can guess, highly critical at the moment and hugely pivotal in how we move forward as a service. I became involved in the sexual misconduct work back in 2018 when South Wales Police were one of the first forces to really lift the rock on sexual harassment in the workplace. The Welsh region was, to be fair. We've got a brilliant region here in Wales, which are really focused on equality and diversity issues. And it was actually prompted, not by the things you've seen in the press more recently, but it was actually by, excuse me, I'm full of cold. It was actually by this really powerful survey by the LSE and the University of Surrey, I think it was, and Unison, looking at the experience of police staff and sexual harassment. That's back in 2018, had some stark findings, which then prompted the Welsh region to look, is this an issue in the force? Is this an issue in our 4 Welsh forces? Is it affecting police officers too? So we did an independent review with a brilliant company called Chwarae Teg, who are a gender equality charity in Wales. They came in and did this work with us where we found, yes, it absolutely is an issue. And there were things that I had thought we had left in the dark and distant past. You know, women being subject to incredibly inappropriate behaviour, inappropriate language, banter. I hate that term. I wish I could find something else for it. And those kind of things. So we started work on this in South Wales, really drove some powerful pieces of work to change that culture, and ended up taking on the national work. The things that you see are coming out in that report, unfortunately, aren't a huge surprise to those of us working in this field, but I recognise they're incredibly painful for the rest of policing, because like myself, people think we've left this in the past, and it's clear that we haven't. And I think it's really important to say that the vast majority of us working in policing just don't recognise that culture, aren't part of it, and feel really strongly about it. So when we're talking about misogyny in policing, that for me is really painful, because misogyny being that hatred of women, I can honestly say I've never experienced that in 22 years from my colleagues. I'm a police staff member, which may make me more susceptible sometimes to this. I've never experienced that feeling of hatred from any of my male colleagues. We've passed some right wrong ends, no doubt, during those years. We're part of our community. But what we found when we did the work internally was that there was a real low level of understanding of what sexual harassment and abusive position is, and a real high level of tolerance for that behaviour. So women assimilating into teams, and almost this ethical drift of teams, moving from what is an ethical behaviour and then slowly sliding, starting with that banter that becomes a little bit more inappropriate, that then perhaps moves into inappropriate relationships in the workplace, and so on. And women had kind of grown accustomed to it, which made it hard for them to see as well, because we don't get a lot of people standing up against the behaviour, because we've just become used to it. So that was a key starting point for us, and I think that's a key starting point from this report, is really understanding that tolerance in the workplace for this, and how we start breaking. We want everybody to come to work and be treated with dignity and respect. We want healthy team cultures for everyone. And we can't silo this up into gender, into race, into homophobia. We need to come together as protected characteristics and say no more. And this is what a healthy team culture looks like. And this is why this behaviour is wrong internally, because it reflects externally in how we treat each other, is how we treat our communities. And that's the key rub for me. But I take great heart in that, whilst reading that is really stark and will be really difficult for our communities and for a lot of people in the force who just don't recognise this as part of who they are. For those of us working in this space, it's no surprise, but I am really reassured by the activity the forces are taking to stamp out this behaviour. We've got brilliant people working across the UK in professional standards departments to really look at what are early intervention, what are, how do we culture change? I'm sure you hear lots of those comments.
Yeah.
But how do we do that? And how do we do that quickly but meaningfully, so we don't drive behaviour underground, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's not a surprise, but I'm really reassured, and I'd reassure anybody who's watching this, that there is masses being done by forces to really stamp out this behaviour. And as someone who's worked there for 20 odd years in 2 forces now and travelled to lots of others, I've been blessed with a really great career that has not really been marred by significant cases of this. So it's an interesting one.
Yeah, and I think when a report like that is published, the media pinpoints and picks out almost scaremongering with the public. But obviously, with the Sarah Everard case, like, you know, I worked in London for 10 years and living back up north now in Leeds. And, you know, it really, really touched so many women, didn't it? So,
And
yeah.
what I really, you know, policing has been a difficult time, I think, for a number of us over the last couple of years. You know, certainly those of us who are strong equality and diversity allies. You know, we had the Black Lives Matter movement, which certainly had a number of us really thinking about, have we moved forward since Macpherson report and Stephen Lawrence, when so much work was done. And then Sarah Everard, I mean, I cannot tell you the pain of colleagues to know that someone took advantage of their power to do the worst possible thing you can do to another human being. And then for that to be what we are known for, you know, for women in the service, it felt like, oh, we don't want to be part of this anymore. We can't. You feel almost a traitor to the cause. How can I be a gender equality ally and know that this has happened in our name almost? Someone using their power, dressed in their power to do this. And for our male colleagues who, you know, as I said, just work so hard as well alongside us to treat people with dignity and respect. It was so painful. Nothing compared to the pain of, you know, obviously her family and friends, and, you know, the pain of what that causes to the communities. But it really struck a painful note, I think, for a huge number of us.
Yeah, I bet. And what you said, it's almost like being tarred with the same brush, isn't it? The force is full of people that work, that are so committed to their job, the service. And like when you say about being a woman in the force, that must have been really difficult. Because one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is how the force are proactively, you know, recruiting more women and then having women in the force right up to, you know, when they retire. Is that part of the strategy, especially after everything that's coming out? Have we seen more women leaving the force or less joining? I know there's a drive to get more officers recruited.
Yes.
So is there like a special recruitment technique or a way to get more women and appeal to more women?
It's really interesting because for me, we tend to get quite healthy numbers of women entering the service. I think we're at something like 40% representation in terms of officer numbers. Staff numbers are far higher. Women tend to take up more of the staff roles. Well, we've seen around 40%, which of course isn't representative of our makeup in our communities, but it's so much more than it was when we were middling at 30% for a long time. So that 10% increase is really powerful. For me, when I was gender equality chair, I was really keen that I didn't become involved so much in the recruitment side of things, because I wanted to make sure that when women land, they entered a workplace that supported them and empowered them to live their best lives and live their authentic lives. So most of my energy goes into there. As part of the Violence Against Women and Girls framework, there are aspects in there around encouraging greater gender representation in the organisation. So that's part of the recruitment and drawing women in. But for me, what women often realise is they land in a service that is 24/7, 365 days a year. It has a huge impact on your family life and your work life. So we really focused on how do we focus on family-friendly policies? How do we ensure that women have access, and men have access actually, to flexible working policies, to be able to work part-time, to be able to be parents, and really encouraging our men to be part of that as well. And so that when women come in, they have the option of knowing that taking time out to have children won't impact their career, because we know that women are behind men in terms of the career pathway, and it's getting better. The other thing that's really interesting for me as well, I think, is we talk a lot about gender equality in role. So policing is vast. You know, you come in as a PC and then suddenly there's this huge world open to you of roles. You can go into child protection, you can become a firearms officer, you can go to the dogs and horses section. You can fly helicopters if you want, you know. There's so much there that you can do. You can work in our digital departments. It's honestly, there's a career for everyone. It feels like about 22 years in multiple organizations because I've been able to do so many roles. But for me, the interesting thing is we do this real drive of we must have gender representation everywhere. And that's fine if that's what women want. Now, we know that some women don't want to go work in firearms.
Yeah.
Some women don't want to go and work in some of those male-oriented departments, not necessarily because they feel they're entering a male department that's going to have, you know, this leery kind of culture, but because it's just not what they fancy. And it's the same, men sometimes don't want to come and work in some of the domestic abuse departments or those kind of things. It's about gender equality of opportunity, I guess. So as long as there's no barriers to women going into those roles, there's nothing stopping them that is organisationally created. I'm quite relaxed about that gender picture. As long as they've got the opportunity to go in there, I'm happy. If they feel that there's barriers that are stopping them going into those roles, then that's when we need to do the work.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
forces are working really hard around those things, I would say, to make sure that they've got representation, to make sure that they are, you know, really striving to create healthy, as I say, healthy teams where people can be parents. And I class all genders as that, not just women.
And can you tell us a little bit more about the conversations about sexual misconduct that is that separate? I know in the work that you're doing, is that like a separate initiative that you're doing?
It is. So when I came into Thames Valley Police, I came in quite recently. I'm seconded from South Wales, mainly to do with the national recruitment and retention and wellbeing of investigators, which is something I'm really excited about, but also to help them with their violence against women and girls internal response. My day job is internal engagement manager. So what for me is key when we are doing all this drive around how we create healthy team cultures, and you know, we have to understand, as I said, this perception externally of how the media play some of this and how that's repeated back on social media by our communities, of course, who hear this narrative. That can have a real impact on our officers and staff. And sometimes there can be a bit of a pushback. So for me, engagement is key. Is when you're taking this messaging, not just putting posters up, not just putting something on your internet, but taking it to people and helping people have difficult conversations where they're not shy to say or ask the awkward question that they feel perhaps might kind of get them into trouble, perhaps. So I've created the internal engagement violence against women and girls strategy, which is one of the first that we've seen in the UK that is targeted specifically at this subject. And one of the interventions is the courageous conversations. I'm a big fan of conversations like this, of webinars that people can just dip in and out of what they need. But I talk a lot, as you can tell. And they tend to be about 2 hours long. So what we've done, we've split what is sexual misconduct. We've split it into 6 separate categories, going right back to why are we still banging on about gender equality? Why is this still an issue for us? We've got women as chief constables now. Come on, get over it, girls. It's still an issue. It's still an issue because of the things we've talked about. So what is that? Taking it right through then into everyday sexism and misogyny. And how misogyny, you know, we're using that term, as I said, I don't feel there's a hatred of women, people I work with, but there is a cultural issue that we all are subject to around that everyday sexism piece that is ingrained in us from a young age, and we've really delved into that as an issue. And that one gives real light bulb moments for how we raise our children, how we speak to our partners, you know, for all genders. Then taking it into, right, what does sexual misconduct mean? Going into, what does sexual harassment look like? Sexual harassment in the workplace, there's this idea of, oh my gosh, I can't ask anybody out. You can ask someone out, but when they tell you no, you don't ask them again. Or when you break up, you don't suddenly start, you know, making a nuisance of yourself. Or do you know what I mean? Just recognize this isn't about, you know, oh, I can't tell you can't open a door for someone anymore. That's not it. That's not it at all. But you can't ask someone about their sex life or, you know, what they get up to. Come on, let's have a listen. So we really delved into what those conversations look like. And again, we've got one today about how you report this behaviour and how you be an upstander to it. And we've got a few more coming up around healthy team culture leadership and how leaders create that culture and they core role in that. And it's been great because people come along, they engage, they in the chat function, we use Slido, which allows them to ask questions anonymously. So they ask the questions that they feel they couldn't ask in training. You know, one of the big ones that we had in the last session was, what if the behaviour doesn't mean to be sexual harassment? And right, yeah. So, so you know someone's panicking here, right? That they might have asked someone out, and maybe if you it's like nothing around sexual harassment that we end up sacking people for is accidental. Nobody gets sacked for, you know, we've all perhaps asked the wrong person something once, or you know, we've got to have this ability to sometimes get it wrong with each other. You know, it's the same about the clumsy conversations around race or trans or LGBTQ plus issues. We have to be able sometimes to ask a daft question, you know, if it comes from an open space and a good place. And so being able to encourage people to ask those kind of questions, and for us then to be able to say, it's very rare for sexual harassment to be accidental. People know what they're doing.
This is so brilliant, the work that you're doing, even the fact that they can ask anonymous, because we've all been, haven't we, in training sessions, when I think back to my career and you're in the moment and you think, oh my God, am I going to sound stupid, or will I be judged? Or so that is really impressive that they've got this sort of safe space, and then this culture work. This is how you're doing, you know, that culture work is so important, and it takes time, but having those platforms is really impressive that you guys are doing that.
Because we're so afraid of upsetting people. I mean, I'm really fortunate. I got some brilliant transgender friends who I'm sure I have been so clumsy with in the way that I've asked questions around, and they're so patient with me. And I hate that we put the burden on people, you know, to kind of explain this when, you know, we're able to look and learn ourselves. But I wanted people to have that environment where they can ask that clumsy question, you know, without fear of being offensive, with a facilitator there to help, you know, perhaps phrase it more appropriately, or because people, that's how we learn, isn't it? Is when we bond.
Exactly. So that's amazing. And so you said you've got another one today. Is that like a regular thing that you're doing, just daily, weekly in the force? That's really impressive.
And every other week.
Every other week, wow. And I also wanted to say congratulations, because I know you've just won the 2022 Gender Equality Champion Award at the Women's Spire Awards. Well done. How was that to be recognised, you know, for all this amazing work you're doing? How was that?
It's mortifying. There are so many people out there who deserve it more than me. You know, you're in this room full of these brilliant people. And you think, what on earth am I doing here? You know, imposter syndrome, that's it. That's a Zoom call for another day, right? It really is. But it was such a huge privilege. And I think it's the thing that's mortifying for me is this is what I come here to do. All I want to do is make a difference and make a positive difference for people. I just want to be able to, it's not about power, it's about influence. What can I change for the better? And I don't see that as something to be rewarded, really. I think, you know, it's just, that's what I'm here to do. That's what I like to do. But it was really, really special. And it was a real privilege to be just in the room full with all those brilliant people.
Well, it's amazing to be recognised. I know you're being super modest, but you've obviously been recognised because you're doing such a fantastic job. And it's so refreshing to hear, you know, like a report can come out that is so, you know, quite upsetting when you read the way the media pick out certain parts. And we've talked all about that, but the work that you're doing is amazing, and it's inspiring, and it's so important to share it. Like for Jobs for Women, we've got women of all ages, you know, listening to the podcast and talking about all of these issues. I did also want to ask before we finish, does the force see many women, I don't know if you'll know this just off the top of your head, you know, like if they're already in a career and they fancy changing, does that is that oh, that's amazing.
Happens a lot. And I would urge women as well to consider, it's not just, you don't have to just put a uniform on, you don't just have to be a police officer. Policing is such a vast environment for staff and for operational colleagues. We do see people coming in later in service. There's a brilliant, Thames Valley Police have had on LinkedIn, there's a couple of articles on people who have come in, you know, in their 40s, and, you know, seen out their career there, and older. You know, we've had PCSOs join older, and also, as I said, staff jobs where you can be operational, you know, in call centres, or, you know, I started as a typist. You know, I've been so lucky to have what feels like a new career every 2-3 years, because I've just been able to dance into different things. So I would absolutely urge women everywhere, you know, and by all means, if you want to share my details, or, you know, I'm on LinkedIn,
Yeah,
please get in touch with me.
absolutely. I was going to actually ask you that next. We're so aligned. I was going to say, if people want to connect with you, and yeah, is LinkedIn the right place?
Yeah, that's probably the best.
Okay.
You'll catch me there more often than not.
Okay, and I'll put some details in the show notes.
I'm on Twitter as well. Twitter's a good one to catch me on as well.
All right, I'll add your Twitter handle.
We've got a really good debate next week. There's a brilliant COP chat. It's called WeCops, #WeCops. It happens every Wednesday at 9 o'clock in the evening. And we've got one next week, because it's our Wellbeing of Investigative Week of Action. And we've got a WeCop chat next week talking about attraction and recruitment. So if people are interested in coming into pathways, because you can come in direct as a detective in some cases.
Oh, wow.
So if anybody's interested, they can join that chat and ask me and Deputy Chief Constable Jason Hogg some questions on that next week.
Brilliant. I'll share those details as well on the website. Thank you so much. I know I keep saying thank you, and all of our correspondence before this interview, I just want you to know that I am really grateful, and you've got such an inspiring story, and keep doing this amazing work. And thanks for giving us your time today. I hope you continue to do great things, which I'm sure you will.
Oh, no, thank you for inviting me. It's a real pleasure and a real joy, and lovely to meet you as well, face to face. So stay in touch, and as I said, share my details. I'm happy to talk anytime. I'm very passionate about policing, as I'm sure you can tell. So please get in touch.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Take care.